The farmer sat at his old wooden desk and typed a short message on his computer. It was nothing special, just a simple ad for farm workers. Help needed on small farm, food and place to sleep included, he wrote. He thought maybe a few local people or maybe poor workers from nearby towns would answer. He only wanted some extra hands to fix fences, milk cows, and harvest crops. Life on the farm was hard, and he was tired of doing everything alone. After posting the job ad, he closed his laptop and looked outside. The sun was setting over wide golden fields. The evening wind carried the smell of earth and hay. It was a normal night, silent except for the call of crickets. The farmer sighed, thinking nothing big would ever happen in his life. He was wrong, very wrong. The next evening, when the sky was painted with strange red clouds, he heard a knock on his old wooden gate. At first, he thought it must be some kids, or maybe a lost traveler. But when he opened the gate, his heart almost stopped. Standing there were 5 tall figures covered in long, dark cloaks. Their eyes glowed faintly in the fading light. Their faces looked tired, sad, and full of fear. One of them stepped forward and spoke in broken English. "We saw your message. Job for workers. Please take us." The farmer blinked, thinking he was dreaming. These were not normal women. Their skin had strange colors, some pale silver, some dark blue. Their hands were thin but strong, with faint lines that glowed. Like fireflies, they were not human. They were aliens. The farmer took a step back, his mind racing. Why would aliens come to his farm? Why would they answer a simple ad for workers? He almost closed the gate, but then he saw their eyes. There was no anger, no trick, only deep sadness. One of them whispered, her voice shaking. "We have no home, no food, no safe place. Please shelter." The farmer could not believe what he was hearing. He had read stories on the internet about strange sightings, about UFOs in the sky. But now, 5 alien women stood right in front of him, their faces hidden by sorrow, their bodies weak from hunger. He wanted to ask questions, where they came from, why they were here, but the widows spoke first, their voices heavy with pain. "Our husbands are gone. All gone. War took them, left us with nothing." The farmer felt his chest tighten. He could see the grief in their eyes, the same grief he had felt when he lost his parents years ago. But there was something else too. Fear. They kept looking over their shoulders as if something was chasing them. "Please," one said again, "we beg you, let us stay. We work. We serve. Only give us shelter." The farmer's mind shouted at him to refuse. This was trouble, and trouble was the last thing he needed. He was only one man with a small farm. How could he protect 5 alien widows? What if the government found out? What if soldiers came? What if these women brought danger to his home? But then he saw one of them fall to her knees, too weak to stand. Another tried to help her up, but almost collapsed too. Their long cloaks hid thin, shaking bodies. The farmer's heart, though scared, could not ignore what he was seeing. They were not enemies, they were survivors, and they were begging him for help. Slowly, the farmer opened the gate wider. "Come inside," he said, his voice quiet, but firm. The widows looked at each other, then walked through the gate, their steps heavy and slow. The farmer led them to the barn, the only place big enough to shelter them. He gave them blankets, water, and some bread from the kitchen. They ate, quickly, like people who had not eaten in days. The farmer stood by, still confused, still unsure if this was real. Later that night, he sat on his porch staring at the stars. He thought about his normal, lonely life before this moment. He thought about the simple job that he had posted just to find workers, and now he had 5 alien widows hiding in his barn. What had he done? Then in the silence, he heard a sound. Not from the barn, but from the far edge of the fields, a low hum like machines far away. The widows must have heard it too, because he saw them huddled together inside, whispering quickly, their eyes filled with terror. The farmer froze. Something was coming. Something that had followed them here. And by opening his gate, he had just opened his life to a danger he did not yet understand. The barn was quiet except for the soft breathing of the alien widows. They lay wrapped in old blankets the farmer had given them, their faces pale under the dim light of a single lamp. The farmer sat on a wooden stool nearby, watching them carefully. He still could not believe they were real. 5 alien women, widows of war, resting in his barn. His hands shook slightly as he poured water into cups. He had questions burning in his mind, but he stayed silent. He wanted to give them time. When morning came, the farmer found the widows awake. They had cleaned the barn floor with old tools. As if trying to show respect, one of them, taller than the others, looked at him with sad eyes. "You gave us shelter," she said softly. "We tell you truth now." Her voice was gentle but carried weight. The other widows nodded, their faces serious. The farmer leaned forward, his heart beating faster. The tall widow began her story. "We come from Far Star, our world broken by war." She paused, her hands trembling as she held the cup of water. "Our husbands fought, all gone now. We left with nothing, only grief." Her words were simple, broken, but her pain was clear. The farmer listened in silence. He could see the other widows clutching their cloaks tightly, tears glimmering in their glowing eyes. One of them pulled back her sleeve. Her arm was covered with scars that glowed faintly. "War burn us," she whispered. "We escape, but hunters follow." The farmer frowned. "Hunters?" he asked carefully. The widows exchanged fearful looks. Another spoke in a shaking voice. "Yes, hunters. They kill widows, they take what we keep safe." The farmer felt a chill run down his spine. Something about their words made the night noise from before echo in his memory. The humming in the fields. Was it the hunters? The farmer asked, "What are they hunting? Why chase you?" The widow stayed silent for a long moment. Finally, the tall one answered, "Not only us. They want secret we carry. Secret from our husband's last fight." Her eyes glowed, brighter for a second, then dimmed. The farmer felt his chest tighten with unease. He wanted to ask what the secret was, but he could see the fear on their faces. It was not time yet. Instead, he said, "You can stay here for now, but you must work like I asked in the ad." He hoped farm work would keep them busy, keep his mind away from the danger creeping closer. The widows agreed quickly, eager to repay him. That day they worked in the fields beside him. Though their bodies looked fragile, they were stronger than he expected. One lifted heavy hay bales with ease, another repaired fences faster than any worker he had ever seen. The farmer was surprised, but he kept quiet. Something about their abilities felt otherworldly. And deep down, he wondered, were they hiding more than just their pain? When the sun set again, the widows gathered around a small fire outside the barn. The farmer sat nearby, pretending to clean tools. But really he was listening. They spoke in their own tongue, soft and quick. Words he did not understand. But their voices carried sorrow. One of them suddenly broke into quiet sobs. Another reached out and held her, whispering comfort. The farmer looked away, his chest heavy. It was clear now. These women were not just visitors, they were broken souls. War had torn their families apart, and now they carried grief that no human could fully imagine. Later that night, the tall widow came to the farmer. Her steps were slow, as if weighed down by her past. She stood in the doorway of his small farmhouse and said, "You wonder why we beg shelter? You think we bring trouble?" The farmer did not deny it. He nodded, his face serious. She continued, her voice shaking. "Yes, trouble follow us, but we had no choice. Our world call us cursed, our own people push us away. Widows of soldiers are shame to them." Her eyes filled with tears. "We have no place in our own world, no place in Galaxy, only death behind us, no future ahead." The farmer felt something stir inside him. He had known loneliness, but not like this. Not the kind where even your own kind reject you. He spoke softly. "You are safe here, for now." The widow looked at him for a long time, then nodded. But before she turned away, she said one last thing. "Safe? No place safe, human. Hunters never stop, they always find us." The farmer could not sleep that night. He sat by his window, staring out at the fields. The barn was quiet, the widows finally resting. But in the distance he thought he saw A flicker of light in the sky. Not a star, not a plane, something else. He clenched his fists. He had offered shelter, but he did not know what kind of storm was about to crash into his life. For now, all he knew was this. 5 alien widows carried heavy sorrow, but they also carried a secret, and secrets had a way of drawing enemies close. The farm was quiet after a long day. The widows had worked hard, their alien hands surprisingly skilled at simple farm tasks. They carried hay, repaired fences, and even calmed the restless animals. The farmer watched them with mixed feelings. He admired their effort, but deep inside, a heavy unease sat in his chest. Their words from earlier kept echoing in his mind. Hunters, grief, secret. Too many shadows in their story. But he pushed the thoughts away as the evening fell. When night came, the widows returned to the barn. They wrapped themselves in blankets and sat close together, whispering in their strange language. The farmer gave them lanterns, bread, and water before closing the barn doors. He told himself they would be safe there, at least for now. But as he walked back to his small farmhouse, he kept glancing at the dark fields. The crickets sang. The wind moved gently through the tall grass. Yet he felt something was watching, something waiting. Inside his house, the farmer tried to rest. He sat on his bed, but every creak of the old wood made him sit up straight. Every sound outside felt louder than normal. The rustle of leaves, the call of an owl, even the shifting of animals in the barn. Finally, unable to bear the silence, he lit a lantern and stepped outside. The cool night air touched his face as he walked slowly toward the barn. The widows were quiet inside, but he saw their shapes moving through the small window. They were not sleeping. They sat in a circle, their glowing eyes dim but alert, as if they too expected something to come. The farmer took a seat on the porch and leaned back. Above him, the sky stretched wide, filled with stars. He had always loved this sky. It was peaceful, eternal. But tonight the stars looked sharp and cold, like 1,000 watching eyes. He tried to tell himself he was imagining things, but then, just as his eyes were closing, he heard it again. The same low hum he had heard the night before. It came from the far side of the fields, faint but steady, like a machine breathing in the dark. The farmer froze, gripping the lantern tightly. He stood and stared into the distance, but all he saw was black. Still, the hum grew louder for a moment, then faded away. It left behind an empty silence, heavier than before. The widows inside the barn stirred, their whispers rising in fear. One of them opened the door slightly, her face pale. "You hear it too," she whispered. "They come." The farmer's blood ran cold. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What is it? Who's out there?" But the widow only shook her head. "Not tonight, but soon," she said, her eyes glowing faintly in the lantern light. Then she shut the door, leaving the farmer alone again. Hours passed slowly. The farmer stayed awake, pacing between his porch and the barn. The widows did not sleep either. Their shadows moved against the barn wall, restless and tense. Around midnight, the wind changed. It blew stronger, carrying with it the smell of smoke, faint but strange. The farmer's heart pounded as he searched the horizon. Far off, he thought, he saw a flash of red light. Quick and sharp, it vanished before he could be sure. But the widows cried out softly inside the barn. They had seen it too. The farmer hurried inside the barn. The widows stood close together, their cloaks pulled tight. One of them pointed to the sky, her voice shaking. "Scouts. They search. They always search." The farmer swallowed hard. "Scouts? For you?" The tall widow nodded slowly. "Yes, for us. And for what we keep hidden." The farmer wanted to demand answers. What was this secret? Why risk his farm, his life, his peace? But looking at their faces, so tired, so broken, he kept his questions inside. Instead, he whispered, "Then we keep quiet. Stay hidden. No one will find you here." The widows nodded, but their eyes said otherwise. They knew hiding would not be enough. As the night dragged on, the farmer finally returned to his house. He locked the doors, shut the windows, and kept the lantern burning. Still, he could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the widow's fearful faces. He heard the hum in the fields, the whispers of hunters, and he remembered the flash of red light across the horizon. Near dawn, just before sleep finally took him, he had one last thought. He had welcomed strangers into his home out of kindness. But kindness had a price, he could feel it now. The price was coming closer, step by step, through the dark fields. And the first night was only the beginning. Asterisk. The morning sun rose over the quiet farm. Golden light touched the fields, but the farmer felt no peace. His eyes were heavy from a restless night. The sound of that strange hum still echoed in his ears. He had hoped it was just his imagination, but the widow's fear told him it was real. When he walked to the barn, he found the widows already awake. They had cleaned the barn again, sweeping the floor and stacking hay neatly in corners. One was mending torn blankets with steady hands. Another fed the animals, humming a soft tune in her alien language. The farmer stopped for a moment, watching. Silently, they moved with quiet grace like people who wanted to repay a debt. It touched something inside him. He had given them shelter, and in return they worked as if his farm was now their own. During the day, the farmer showed them more tasks: how to guide the cows to pasture, how to water the crops, how to carry feed. The widows listened carefully, repeating his words in broken English. They tried hard, even when the work was rough on their thin bodies. One of them slipped carrying a heavy bucket, spilling water on the dirt. The farmer hurried to help, but she smiled weakly and said, "We learn, we try." The farmer found himself smiling back. For the first time since they arrived, he felt less afraid. Maybe they truly just wanted peace. At noon, they all sat under a tree to eat. The farmer gave them bread, fruit, and milk. The widows ate slowly, grateful for every bite. One of them whispered, "On our world, widows starve. No one give food." The farmer frowned, anger sparking in his chest. He could not understand a people who would treat the grieving like outcasts. He said firmly, "Here, no one starves on my farm." The widows looked at him with wide eyes, as if his words were a gift greater than food. As the days passed, a fragile bond began to grow. The widows trusted him more, and the farmer found himself talking to them. He told them stories of his childhood, of learning farm work from his father. He told them about long winters when the fields froze and about spring rains that saved the crops. The widows listened with quiet wonder. One of them said softly, "Your world, so simple but so alive." Another added, "We had beauty once before war burned everything." The farmer saw tears fall, and without thinking, he placed a hand on her shoulder. It was the first human touch they had felt in a long time. They did not pull away. That night, the farmer checked the barn before sleep. He saw the widows sitting close together again, whispering. But this time, something glowed faintly between them. Curiosity made him step closer, his boots crunching on the dirt. The widows gasped and quickly covered the glowing object with a blanket. The farmer stopped, his voice calm but firm. "What was that?" The tall widow stood, her face pale in the lantern light. Her voice was low, almost trembling. "Not safe to tell." "Not yet." The farmer's jaw tightened. He wanted to demand answers, but he saw fear in her eyes. It was not fear of him. It was fear of losing what they carried. He nodded slowly. "Keep your secret. But know this. If danger comes, it comes to all of us." The widows lowered their heads in silence. The bond was growing, but walls still remained between them. Later, as the farmer returned to his house, he could not shake the image from his mind. The faint glow under the blanket, it was not natural. It was something alive or powerful or both. He sat on his porch staring at the barn. The widows had brought more than sorrow to his farm. They had brought a secret that hunters would kill for. And now, it was hidden inside his barn. The next morning, as the widows worked beside him, the farmer noticed something else. One of them reached to lift a heavy log, far too heavy for her thin arms, but she did it easily, her hands glowing faintly as she carried it across the field. Another repaired a broken plow, her fingers moving fast with strange precision. The farmer watched with narrowed eyes. They were not ordinary refugees. They had abilities, powers that humans did not. The question grew sharper in his mind. Were they here to find safety, or were they hiding something dangerous? That evening, as the sun dipped low, one of the widows approached him. Her eyes glowed softly, but her face carried deep sadness. "You wonder about us," she said in broken words. "You think maybe we lie." The farmer said nothing, waiting. She lowered her gaze and whispered, "We only want peace, but peace is hunted too." Her voice cracked, and for a moment the farmer saw the truth. Behind their secrets, behind their powers, they were still broken hearts searching for safety. The farmer's chest softened. He nodded once and said quietly, "Then this farm is your home for as long as you need it." The widow's eyes filled with tears. She bowed her head, whispering words in her own tongue, words that sounded like prayer. That night, the farmer entered the barn again. When the widows thought he was asleep, they had uncovered the glowing object. It pulsed like a living star, filling the barn with soft light. The farmer stood in the shadows, his breath caught in his throat. He finally understood why the hunters would never stop. The widows were not just carrying grief. They were carrying something far greater, something that could change everything. The farm had grown strangely alive in the past days. The widows worked hard, their voices soft but steady. They brought an energy the farmer had not felt in years. But beneath this fragile peace, fear always lingered. The secret glowing object in the barn pulsed like a hidden heart, and every time the farmer looked at it, he knew trouble was on its way. That night the sky looked wrong. The stars were too sharp, the air too heavy. The farmer sat on his porch, lantern glowing beside him. The widows were in the barn, whispering prayers in their strange tongue. He heard them repeat the same word over and over. It sounded like shield or sanctuary. Their voices carried sorrow, but also dread. Then it came. A sound split the night, loud, sharp, unnatural. Not thunder, not wind, but the scream of engines in the sky. The farmer jumped to his feet, his heart hammering, above the fields. Dark shapes cut across the stars, strange ships moving fast, silent except for the low hum he had heard before. They were here. The barn door burst open. The widows rushed out, their cloaks flying in the wind, their glowing eyes wide with terror. "They found us," one cried, her voice trembling. Another clutched the farmer's arm. "You must hide, human, this not your fight." But the farmer shook his head. "This is my land," he said firmly, "and no one comes here without facing me." The ships landed at the far edge of the fields. The ground shook. Animals screamed, and lights like burning fire lit up the night. Figures stepped out, tall, armored, faceless, hunters. Their weapons glowed faintly, humming with deadly energy. They moved. In silence, like shadows with purpose, the farmer's chest tightened. He had no guns, no soldiers, no plan. But he had the land, his land, and he knew every inch of it. The widows stood behind him, shaking. The tall widow whispered, "They want what we carry. They never stop, they never forgive." The farmer's jaw clenched. He looked at them and said, "Then we make them regret stepping onto this farm." The hunters spread out across the field. Their leader raised a glowing staff and shouted in a metallic voice, "Widows of the fallen, surrender what you hide or all will burn." The farmer stepped forward, lantern in hand. His voice was steady though his knees shook. "This is my farm, my home. Leave now, or face me." The hunters laughed, a cruel sound like grinding metal. One aimed his weapon at the barn. The widows gasped and pulled the farmer back. "No! If they touch it, all is lost," one cried. The first blast came. A beam of light struck the ground, exploding dirt and fire into the air. The farmer threw himself down, ears ringing. The widows screamed but did not run. Instead, their hands glowed, faint lines of light racing across their skin. One lifted her arms and a barrier of shimmering force appeared. The next blast hit it, shaking the ground but holding. The farmer's eyes widened. So this was their power. The hunters moved. Closer, weapons firing. The farmer scrambled to his feet and ran toward the barn. He pulled out old tools, pitchforks, ropes, even jars of oil. It was not much, but it was all he had. He set quick traps, pouring oil near fences, stacking hay in paths. The widows fought. Beside him, their glowing hands pushing back beams of energy, but the hunters were many. For every strike the widows blocked, 2 more came. The night filled with fire and smoke. The farmer lit the oil with his lantern. Flames roared up, blocking one side of the field. The hunters hissed, their advance slowing. The farmer used ropes to trip 2 of them, pulling their armored bodies into the dirt. He was only human, but he knew his land better than anyone, and tonight, that knowledge was his weapon. Still the hunters pressed on. Their leader strode forward, towering over all. His staff glowed brighter, a weapon stronger than the rest. The widow's barrier cracked under its force. The tall widow cried out, falling to her knees. The farmer ran to her, pulling her up. "We can't hold them," she whispered, her voice breaking. The farmer looked at her, sweat running down his face. "Then we don't hold them. We fight back." He turned to the barn. The glowing object inside pulsed brighter now, as if sensing the danger. The farmer hesitated, then shouted to the widows, "Use it! Whatever it is, use it!" But the widows shook their heads in fear. "No, too dangerous, too much power. It destroy everything." The farmer's chest tightened. Then he saw the hunters closing in. Their weapons aimed directly at the barn. There was no time left. The leader of the hunters raised his staff high. His voice thundered through the fields. "Give it to us or burn with it." The widows cried out, clinging to the farmer. The farmer stood tall, his face hard. "You want it? You'll have to go through me first," he shouted, and then the staff came down. A beam of blinding light struck the earth, shaking the whole farm. The barn doors burst open, the glow inside blazing like a newborn star. The secret the widows had carried was no longer hidden. Its light spilled out, turning night into day. The hunters froze, their armored faces turning toward it. The farmer shielded his eyes, heart pounding. He had no idea what this thing was, but now it was awake. Asterisk. The night sky was no longer dark. The glowing object inside the barn pulsed like a living star. Its light spilled across the fields, bright and fierce. The hunters froze for a moment, their weapons lowering as if they too feared its power. The widows clung to each other, their glowing eyes wide with terror. The farmer stood in front of them, chest heaving, sweat dripping. He had never felt so small, yet never so determined. The leader of the hunters pointed his staff at the barn. "Take it," his metallic voice growled. "No matter the cost." The hunters charged, their boots shaking the ground. The widows cried out, their hands glowing as they raised shimmering shields of light. Energy blasts struck the barriers, sparks flying. The farmer grabbed an old pitchfork and ran into the chaos. He was only one man, but this was his land, and he would not give it up. He darted between the hunters, swinging the pitchfork at their legs. One stumbled, crashing to the dirt. Another raised a weapon, but the farmer pulled a rope from his belt. With practiced speed, he wrapped it around the hunter's arm, yanking it tight. The weapon dropped, and the widow beside him blasted the hunter back with a glowing strike. The farmer's chest burned with effort, but his eyes were sharp. He had no advanced weapons, but he had clever hands and a fighter's will. The widows fought with him, their grief turning into strength. One created a barrier that split in 2, blocking blasts from both sides. Another's hands glowed like fire, throwing sparks that knocked hunters off their feet. The farmer shouted directions. "Pull them toward the fence, drive them into the mud." The widows listened, moving as he guided. For the first time they fought as one, human and alien side by side. The hunters regrouped, their leader raising his staff high. A beam of raw energy slammed into the ground, splitting soil and sending shockwaves across the field. The farmer fell hard, dirt stinging his face. The widows cried out, their barriers cracking under the force. The farmer struggled up, his voice hoarse. "Keep fighting! Don't give them an inch." He sprinted to the oil traps he had set earlier. Grabbing his lantern, he hurled it down. Flames erupted, roaring across the field. The fire cut the hunters' path, forcing them back. The farmer grinned through the smoke. "Let's see you metal-faced monsters walk through that," he muttered. But the hunters were relentless. They leapt over the fire, weapons blazing, one aimed directly at the tall widow. The farmer threw himself in front of her, the blast grazing his arm. He gritted his teeth against the pain, but did not fall. The widow caught him, her glowing hands pressing against his wound. Light flowed from her touch, the burn fading. The farmer stared in shock. You healed me." The widow nodded weakly. "Not heal, only hold pain back." The farmer tightened his grip on the pitchfork. "Then we end this before the pain comes back," he said. The battle raged on. The hunters circled the barn, desperate. To reach the glowing object, the farmer realized they feared it as much as they wanted it. It was powerful, dangerous, maybe uncontrollable, but it was also their only chance. "Use it," the farmer shouted, pointing at the barn. The widows shook their heads. "It destroy us all," one cried, but the farmer's voice was fierce. "Better to fight with fire than die in silence." Reluctantly, the widows raised their hands toward the barn. The glowing object pulsed brighter, responding to their call. Light shot out, striking. The hunters with blinding force. Armored bodies flew back, crashing into the dirt. The farmer shielded his eyes, teeth clenched against the heat. The hunters screamed, their voices cracking like broken machines. Still, the leader stood tall. His staff glowing brighter than before, he marched forward, unshaken. "You think light will save you?" he roared. The farmer stepped forward, battered but unbroken. "No," he shouted, "but courage will." He whistled sharply, a signal. From the shadows, his cattle, spooked by the fire and noise, charged across the field. The farmer had opened their gate earlier. Now they thundered into the hunters, horns slamming into armored chests, hooves crushing weapons. The hunters stumbled, their formation breaking. The farmer grinned through blood and smoke. Never underestimate a farmer's herd. With the hunters distracted, the widows unleashed their full strength. Beams of light burst from their hands, striking the enemy with precision. The farmer fought beside them, swinging tools, throwing stones, even using the fire itself. Every inch of the land became a weapon. The hunters fell one by one until only the leader remained. He towered over them, staff glowing like a sun. The farmer stood face to face with him, breathing hard. The leader raised his weapon to strike. But before he could, the tall widow stepped forward. Her hands glowed brighter than ever before. She shouted words in her alien tongue, her voice filled with fury and sorrow. Light exploded from her, striking the leader's staff. It cracked, then shattered, energy spilling into the air. The leader fell back, stunned. The farmer charged, slamming the pitchfork into the ground beside him. "Get off my land," he growled. The hunters, broken and beaten, retreated into the smoke, their ships lifted, engines screaming. Before vanishing into the night sky, the farm fell silent again. The widows collapsed, exhausted but alive. The farmer stood among them, his body aching, his clothes torn, but his eyes burned with defiance. They had survived, human and widow, together. Yet as the night calmed, the farmer knew it was not over. The hunters had failed tonight, but they would return, and the glowing object in the barn pulsed brighter than ever, its secret still hidden, its power still waiting. The real battle had only begun, The farm was quiet after the battle. Smoke curled from burned grass, the air smelled of ash and metal. The cattle grazed nervously in the distance, still unsettled from the chaos. The widows sat together near the barn, their faces pale, their cloaks torn, their glowing eyes dimmed with exhaustion. The farmer stood apart, staring at the horizon where the hunters' ships had vanished. His body ached, his arm throbbed with pain, but his heart was steady. They had survived, but he knew survival was not the same as safety. The hunters would return, stronger, angrier, and the glowing object in the barn was the reason. It pulsed like a living heart, filling the shadows with a quiet, dangerous light. The farmer could not ignore it any longer. He walked to the barn. The widows followed, fear tightening their steps. The tall widow blocked the door, her face pale but firm. "You must not touch it," she whispered. "Too dangerous." The farmer's eyes narrowed. Then tell me the truth, he said. What is it? Why risk your lives to protect it? The widows exchanged glances. Finally, the tall widow sighed, her voice heavy with sorrow. It is the last gift of our husbands, the last weapon of our people. She pulled back the blanket, revealing the object. It floated slightly above the ground, glowing softly. Not just light, but power, alive and humming. It can destroy worlds. Or save them, she said, her voice breaking. The hunters want it to burn, we keep it to protect. The farmer stared at the light, his chest tight. He had never wanted war, never wanted weapons. All he had wanted was workers for his farm. But now fate had placed the galaxy's burden inside his barn, and 5 widows were begging him for shelter. He turned to them, his voice low but steady. If it is that dangerous, then why bring it here? Why not destroy it? One widow whispered, her eyes full of grief. Because it holds their last breath, or our husband's last sacrifice. To destroy it is to erase them. To keep it is to risk death. We had no choice. The farmer felt the weight of their words. He looked at their faces, scarred by war and loss. They had nothing left but this light. It was not just a weapon. It was memory. It was love. He clenched his fists, and in that moment, he made his choice. The next days were spent preparing. The farmer strengthened fences, dug trenches, and moved supplies into hidden cellars. The widows trained with him, teaching him how to use their barriers and light. He taught them how to set traps, how to use the land as a weapon. Together they worked, human and alien, no longer strangers but family. The bond grew deeper. They laughed in rare moments, shared stories, and found comfort in each other's presence. But the shadow of the hunters never left their minds. One night, as they sat by the fire, the tall widow turned to the farmer. You could send us away, she said softly. Send us far from here. Save yourself. The farmer shook his head. This is my farm, he said, and no one drives me off it. If you stay, I stay. If you fight, I fight. The widow's eyes filled with tears. They had been abandoned by their own kind, treated as curses. But here, a human had given them a home. It was more than they ever hoped for. The hunters returned sooner than expected. Ships cut through. The night sky again, their lights burning like false stars. The ground shook with their landing, weapons glowing. This time there were more of them. The farmer stood at the gate, pitchfork in hand. The widows stood behind him, their glowing hands raised. The leader's voice thundered across the fields. Give us the weapon, or all will die tonight. The farmer stepped forward, his voice carried across the night, strong and unbroken. You want it? Then fight for it, but know this, you will not take it while I still breathe. The hunters attacked. The battle was fiercer, louder, deadlier. The farmer fought with every ounce of strength, his traps exploding, his land burning. The widows unleashed their power, barriers shining, beams of light striking true. The hunters pressed hard, but together, human and widow stood strong. In the heart of the fight, the glowing object pulsed brighter. The hunters lunged toward it, desperate. The farmer saw them and ran, his body aching, his breath ragged. He reached the object, hands outstretched. The widows screamed, "No! Too dangerous!" But the farmer ignored them. He grabbed the glowing sphere, its heat burning his skin. Light surged through him, blinding. For a moment he felt everything. The widow's sorrow, the hunter's rage, the power of dying stars. Then he roared, his voice breaking the night. This is my land, my home, my family. The object responded, blazing like a sun. Waves of energy burst out, knocking hunters to the ground, tearing weapons apart. The leader fell, his staff shattered, his armor cracking. The remaining hunters fled, ships rising into the sky and vanishing into darkness. The farmer collapsed, the sphere slipping from his hands. The widows rushed to him, their glowing hands touching his burned skin. They wept as they healed what they could, whispering words of thanks. You saved us. You saved everything. The tall widow whispered, her voice breaking. The farmer opened his eyes, weak but alive. He looked at them and said softly, No. We saved each other. The barn was quiet again. The sphere's glow dimmed, resting, no longer wild but calm. The widows stood with the farmer, no longer strangers, no longer cursed. They had found shelter, and he had found something he never expected. Family. The galaxy might still come for them. Danger might return. But together, they would face it because sometimes one act of kindness could change the stars.